yeah, shoot. Holy shit, my GT500 cost me a lot more money than I ever thought that it did. What's going on, my brothers? Today I'm going to talk about how my Shelby GT500 wrecked my bank account. So prior to making this video, I thought my GT500 cost me maybe like $20,000 or $25,000 to drive for 4 years, but I think it actually cost me a lot more than that after I take into account of depreciation, like how much I got for trading in the car, and interest I paid on my loan. I financed it for 72 months with nothing down, and I got screwed on my trade-in value. You know, they gave me like $3 grand for my car, which is probably worth more like $7,000. And then taking into account for the fact oil changes, which are like $100 per an oil change. Since I bought my GT500 used, I paid for all that out of my pocket, and then the amount of money I spent on tires and insurance and gas, you know, getting 12 miles per gallon on my Shelby GT500. I paid a lot more money for my Shelby GT500 than I ever would have thought that I did. So this video, I'm going to break down how much my Shelby GT500 actually cost me. So maybe you could take some of this stuff into account for your next vehicle purchase if you're thinking about buying a Shelby GT500. I'm not saying to not buy a Shelby GT500 because it's a great car, it's a great experience, and I love the car, but it was a little bit more expensive than I would have ever thought that it cost me. So I show up at the dealership, and the very first thing about the car was it was listed as having the glass roof, which I wanted that. And you know, I show up there and it didn't have the glass roof. Now, you know, that's my fault for not really calling and asking about that prior to just showing up, you know, driving hours to check out this car. But that was a little bit of a disappointment. Anyway, you know, I had talked to a guy, I believe his name was Mike. We were chatting about maybe coming and doing a test drive. So I show up, he's got the car all ready to rock and roll. We take it out for a test drive, and you know, it's like 5 degrees out on summer tires, and you know, I'm not like able to like really drive it like it's meant to be driven. But you know, I take it for a test drive, then I sit down and think about it for a little bit. He's dealing with some other customers who are looking to basically buy some other cars. Eventually, after about, you know, an hour of sitting around in the waiting room, I asked him, you know, hey, can I take it out for a second drive? Can we take it for a second drive? So, you know, we went out for a second test drive in the car, and at that point, I basically had decided to pull the trigger on the car and purchase it. So it was listed for $42,000, and he knew that I drove from Indianapolis basically in my car. So I kind of like backed myself into a corner a little bit there with negotiating power, knowing that I like drove my car from so far away, and basically I wanted to buy the Shelby GT500. So initially they told me that they were going to give me $7,000 for my 2006 Honda Accord, which was, you know, I was happy with that. I was ready to, you know, take that number and make the trade. But after they took a closer look at it, like I said, I didn't maintain it that well, and you know, they knew the situation. So they ended up offering me like $3,000 or something for my Honda Accord, which was crap. You know, I could have got way more for it than that, but you know, at that point I was just ready to buy this Shelby GT500, make the trade, and drive home in my new car, or you know, used new car. So I ended up doing it, and you know, I did 0 down payment on the car and financed it for 72 months. And you know, they punched in all the numbers and got me the best deal or whatever they could on financing. You know, I'm sure they profit from that, obviously. So I financed it 0 down except for my trade-in value, and financed it for 72 months. So you know, I'm thinking at the time like, okay, sure, I'll just finance it out for so long so I know that, you know, I can afford it. Like, it's not going to stress me out on finances or anything, and I can, you know, make a down, like put my down payment later, basically, you know, put like 10,000 into it or 20,000 into it to reduce how much interest I'm going to pay over time. Well, long story short, I did not do that. So my monthly payment was $716, roughly, you know, somewhere in that ballpark, $716 some change, I believe. Now on top of the financing and all that, you know, I had to pay for the title and tax on the car as well. So I want to say, you know, after all things considered, basically I had a loan for about $46,000 on this car that I was thinking that I was probably going to end up paying about $40,000 for. And then on top of that, since I was moving from a 2006 Honda Accord into a 2012 Shelby GT500 with 550 horsepower, my insurance rate went up as well. Now it wasn't that bad. It basically came out to about $100 per month for insurance, which, you know, I've got a pretty good driving record. I had like one violation on my license for like a burnout headlight or something, but I think that got removed anyway. My thought at the time was buying a used car would be a great way to go about, you know, getting into basically newish car, you know, 13,000 miles, and avoid some of that initial depreciation, because like at that time, you know, if you bought a new Shelby GT500, they were about, you know, the $50,000 price point, over $50,000, like depending on exactly the year and stuff. You know, I got the 2012, the 2013 had 100 more horsepower. Oh, we got a police up here. Better stop here at this light with that cop back there. But after buying the Shelby GT500 used, I don't think I'll ever buy a used sports car or muscle car, performance car ever again. And that's because a few factors really. You know, for this car, the BMW M2 I'm in now, it's got all maintenance included for the first 3 years, including oil changes. Now on my GT500, oil changes cost basically $100 each. And on top of that, buying a used performance car, you really don't know what the prior owner did with the car. And for, you know, if you're buying like a normal car, you can basically expect the person drove it normally. But if you're buying a high performance car, who knows like how hard the previous owner beat on the car. And if it's got a manual transmission, which the Shelby GT500 did, you really don't know like how well they took care of the gearbox, the gears, and the clutch, like if they really beat on that thing hard or not. So in my case, I don't really know for sure how the previous owner drove the thing, but second gear was grinding, you know, not all the time. And I know that is a problem with the Shelby GT500s in general for that year, the 2012. But I wasn't ever really sure, you know, how much the previous owner ground that gear, and the clutch life or whatever as well, and the brakes, you know, all that stuff. And then to top it off, like basically about 6 months or so, 6 months or 8 months into having the car, it started leaking engine oil, and then it started dripping differential oil. So I kind of just get the feeling that the owner before me really just beat that car up. But you know, I didn't necessarily take great care of it either, like right away. I know that there's quite a few times when the engine probably wasn't fully warmed up, and I would start giving it like full gas and redlining it. If you look through my previous videos, I'd never had a car that revved so fast and had so much power before. So like I found myself like nailing it in first gear, and I'd be bouncing off the rev limiter within like a half a second. And you know, that probably wasn't good for the engine. Maybe that's why the engine oil started leaking and the differential. But you know, looking back on it now, and I'm gonna make a video about this BMW M2, why I decided to buy it new. That's a big reason. Like, you just don't really know what you're getting yourself into buying a used sports car. Now luckily I didn't have like any like huge problems with my GT500. Leaking a little bit of engine oil isn't really gonna hurt anything as long as you don't let the engine oil run out. And same goes with, I guess, with the differential, like it kept working. But by the time I was ready to sell that car, like I was ready just to get away from it, because I really didn't know what was in the future for it. I mean, they're pretty bulletproof, but I didn't want to find myself sitting on some big repair bills to come, because I mean, you know, that car can be expensive to replace some parts, and you know, I know that things were starting to wear down a little bit. So the next big thing with the Shelby GT500 that really cost me a lot of money was consumables. And yeah, I kind of already touched on the oil changes. They were $100 each, which isn't a real big deal. Basically, you know, you change the oil like every 3,000 miles or so, 5,000 miles. But the other thing is tires and fuel. So let's start with tires. Now, the newer Shelby GT500s don't probably come with the Goodyear Eagle F1 summer tires, but that's what came stock on the 2012 Shelby GT500. And those tires are pretty much crap, honestly. Like, they have really bad reviews in general, and I would say that they are just not a good tire at all, unless you want to be slipping and sliding everywhere, but that's really not what you want from a tire. What is this person doing in front of me? So me being pretty like new to a higher performance car, I really didn't understand exactly what to expect from tires and how important tires were, especially, you know, with 550 horsepower being sent to 2 wheels in the back of the car. You know, it's not the most horsepower in the world, but it's quite a lot, really. And so it came with these Goodyear Eagle F1 tires, and they were summer tires. I bought the car when it was like super cold out, and I didn't realize like how bad summer tires are on cold temperature. In fact, the very first night I had the car, I almost crashed it because I just gunned it when I was going like, I don't know, 40 miles per hour. I gunned it in like 2nd or 3rd gear. I had all the traction control systems on, but the back end just like darted out on me, and I thought for sure we were gonna crash right into the curb or whatever. Luckily, the systems were good enough to save my butt in that case, and I didn't crash the car. But the summer tires, you know, you gotta have winter tires if you're gonna be driving in cold temperatures. Now, once it started warming up and stuff, still those Goodyear Eagle F1 tires just were not getting grip, and like, I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't really understand the situation at the time, and I thought, you know, maybe it was just because the tires were worn out or something. So what I did is I bought a new set of 4 Goodyear Eagle F1 tires and had them installed on the car, and I thought that would fix my traction problems. But what actually happened was I had the same darn car. Like, it was still getting like really poor grip, even though I installed brand new tires on it. And that's just the characteristics of these Goodyear Eagle F1 tires. Like, they're pretty good if it's like really warm out, you know, 70s, mid 70s or 80-degree temperature, and you've driven on the tire for quite some time already. Because like, you have to keep in mind, like, the GT500 with the track package was designed to be driven on a racetrack. So, you know, basically these tires really needed to be warmed up before they had any chance at all of gripping, and even still, like, they were never that great. So spent a lot of money on a new set of the same exact tires I already had, and it was kind of a waste, you know, like $1,000 or more at least. I'd say about $1,000 or 1,200 bucks. So then what I started doing was looking into maybe another alternative tire for the 2012 Shelby GT500. And what I found was there really wasn't a lot of tires that fit the exact wheel size of this car. There wasn't like a big range of options. And what I ended up doing was getting some Mickey Thompson drag radials. I forget exactly which ones they are, but if you look through my previous videos, you can see basically my thoughts and opinions on those. Now, they really did a really good job. Like, they were able to plant the power down in a straight line and you know, make the car like able to drive like it was meant to be driven. Like, they didn't really slide out on you too much unless it was like rainy. But they were pretty good, but they weren't cheap. You know, these tires were probably about 300 bucks each. So I mean, that cost like really started to add up. Now, I kept the old Goodyear Eagle F1 tires, which I still have in my garage. So if anybody wants a set of those tires, like, they're sitting in my garage right now, and If you want to just meet me and pick them up, sure, you can have them. Anyway, long story short, if you're gonna buy a car with 550 horsepower or more, like this new Shelby GT500 that's coming out, supposedly is gonna have 700 plus wheel horsepower, you better have a budget for tires, because your car is gonna eat through tires very quickly. And what another thing is, like, regarding like the gas mileage on the car, consumables, like I was talking about, I got about 12 miles per gallon in my Shelby GT500. 12 to 13 miles per gallon, basically. And that is really pretty much as bad as it gets, really. And I mean, that's just like my average gas mileage from driving spirited, you know, in a sporty manner, not trying to conserve gas mileage. Basically, the very best I could do was cruising on the highway. I could get like maybe 21 or 22 miles per gallon. But I mean, that's only if I'm like cruising in 6th gear at like 60 miles an hour. And then the GT500, or really like any sports car, doesn't take just regular unleaded fuel. You got to get the premium fuel, you know, 91 octane to 93 octane. Here in Indiana, we have 93 octane, and it's a little more expensive, but you know, you're going to be paying more per gallon there. And then, you know, pair that up with getting 12 or 13 miles per gallon. And then to compound that, you know, that's just like what gas mileage the car got. It drank a lot of fuel, and that's just because it has this huge engine and the car weighs a lot. So what I kind of found is, like, either you're wasting a lot of that horsepower and torque, you know, the engine is just like consuming a lot of fuel for a lot of time. You're not really like hammering the throttle, or you are hammering the throttle and using that power, but what you find is the tires aren't capable of even like putting the power to the ground. So like, either you're wasting gas and just cruising around with this 500 horsepower engine that's actually only using maybe 200 or 300 horsepower most of the time, or you're using all that power and you're just spinning the tires and just burning through tires. So I mean, you know, just burning through your bank account really is what you're doing. It's a lot of fun. I don't regret owning the Shelby GT500 at all. It was wonderful. Like, it was an exciting car. I'm glad I got it, and it was a fun experience. But, you know, I'm just making some comments here talking about how it maybe wasn't the most intelligent financial decision I've ever made. So finally, I paid the car off. About 3 years into my 72-month loan, I was looking at buying a new house, and one of the requirements the creditor wanted me to do was not have that car loan. So I paid it off, and after 3 years of making payments of about $716 per month, I still owed like almost $30,000 on the car. So, you know, I spent quite a lot of money on interest on financing my Shelby GT500 for 72 months. And, you know, if you ever look at the, well, how do you say it, amortization schedule or whatever, basically how much principal and interest you're paying, the beginning of your loan, especially the longer you take it out, you're paying a lot more interest for the first months of that loan than you would like towards the end. So I mean, for me, financing the car for 72 months and then basically just doing the minimum payment of $716 per month for a period of like 3 years, almost all that money went to interest and hardly any of it went to principal. So it was just kind of sad to see that I spent so much more money on that car than I ever thought I really would have. But I mean, that's kind of what happens with cars in general. Most of the time they're depreciating assets, but I'm gonna have a video coming up soon about why I decided to buy this 2018 BMW brand new, and some of the financials behind that, how much I paid for it, my down payment, yada yada, all that stuff. So just to share a little bit more about my experience and perspective now, being a little bit maybe more financially responsible, I don't know on that one, but yeah. So really the last component of how the Shelby GT500 wrecked my bank account is when it finally came for a trade-in value, which really wasn't that bad. So, you know, as you know, probably from watching my previous videos, I have the 2018 BMW M2, and I used my 2012 Shelby GT500 as trade-in value for this car. Now, you know, I kind of looked at some of the comments that people have said about the dealership screwing me over on trade-in value and how they manipulate the numbers and yada yada. I don't doubt that for a second. But basically what they told me was the trade-in value they gave me for this was like, or for the Shelby GT500 was like $29,500 or something like that. Basically, a couple $100 short of like $30,000 trade-in value for the Shelby GT500. And it had about 41,000 miles on it. You know, I owned it for basically exactly 4 years, and I bought it with 13,000 miles and sold it with about 41,000 miles. So, you know, I put about 30,000 miles on it in 4 years, which is way under average, I guess. It was my daily driver. I work from home, I work for myself, so I don't commute really, but I do drive around, I guess a lot. I guess less than what a normal person would drive, averaging 12,000 miles per year or whatever they say the standard is. So, you know, they gave me 30,000 roughly for trade-in value, which isn't terrible, but considering, I mean, I don't know, do you think that's good or bad? You know, like I said, after like financing, tax, title, all that stuff, I had about, it was probably about $50,000 to buy the used GT500, you know, including tax, title, trade-in value, 50,000, and I got 30,000 trade roughly. So it cost me about $20,000 to own that car for 4 years. So about 5,000 per year, plus, you know, the tires, oil changes. I got the windows tinted, which isn't a huge deal. I didn't really modify the car much. I didn't do any like brake work, although the car was ready for new brake pads and new rotors too, is what the dealership told me. I don't know if that's true or not. Oh, and I almost forgot, I bought another set of tires for the car right before I sold it. Literally, I had like maybe 500 miles on these tires. I ended up getting some of the Michelin Pilot Sport All Season 3 Plus. People say buying all season tires is buying no season tires. I was pretty happy with them. I thought they stuck pretty well. But you know, I basically put like, you know, they probably cost me about $1,000 for a set of 4. I put them all on the car and then ended up trading it in, like not even like, you know, 1,000 miles into being on the new tires. And that was probably just a huge waste of money on my part, because like, you know, the dealership didn't, you know, they probably would have gave me the same price for the car with or without the new tires, who knows. So would I have a Shelby GT500 again? Probably not as a daily driver, and probably not, I don't think I would. I've kind of experienced that. It was a great car. Now I'm kind of getting more into cars that handle well rather than just like a one-trick pony like the old GT500. You know, the new GT350, it's got better handles, and the new GT500, who really knows what to expect from it. But as far as like just flooring it, going a straight line fast, I think I'm kind of over that after having the GT500 for 4 years. You know, like I was saying, I'm kind of getting more into like throwing the car into a corner and handling. That's like more fun, and somehow I feel like less risky. Like you're somehow maybe less likely to get a ticket for taking a corner fast than going 100 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour speed zone. I could be totally wrong on that, we'll see. I had pretty good luck with the GT500, or I guess you could say perfect luck with the GT500. I never got pulled over one time ever in that car. No tickets, not even stopped, nothing at all. And you know, I drove it pretty hard quite often. I didn't go super fast all the time, but that kind of brings me back, I guess, to maybe why I wouldn't have another GT500 for the street. I don't really see myself getting too much into like drag racing. I did take the GT500 to the drag strip a couple times, and that was fun, but overall, like, it's just too much power, I think, for a street car. Like, even this M2, it's got 360 something horsepower, and like, if I punch it, like, I'm already basically up to as fast as I would really want to go on a street. Now, like the GT500, you know, it's a fun experience to like have a lot of power and just pushing all that power to the rear wheels, but I'm not really sure that it's worth it to me. Like, I would probably allocate that money. I'd want more of that like purchase price to go into some handling, and you don't really need as much power as some of these new cars are offering, because you can't really use it. I mean, so it's not as satisfying of a driving experience to have like a whole lot of power on tap, but like feel like you can never like really use what the car's meant for, because you're just going to be going so fast and it's just so ridiculous. Whereas like this M2, I'm really enjoying the M2 so far, because like I can like use more of the power. Like, I can kind of really push this car, not to its limits, I wouldn't even say that, but I can like really make use of a lot more of what the car has to offer on public streets without doing anything too absolutely ridiculously crazy. Like, for example, the GT500, a lot of times taking corners, like, I just always felt like the car was just like ready to kill me, you know, like that back end, how like those cars are set up, the suspension on them and stuff, it's just more for like straight line performance. So they really didn't do too well in the corners, and like, you know, I spun that car out completely on one occasion, and I don't know how I didn't crash into a curb or something. Like, it was just a really wide road and I got lucky. But you know, and even like the GT350, like that car sounds so freaking good in person, but it's so loud. Like, I guess like now I kind of want something a little more subtle that's not like drawing attention from the law, you know, like where I can like take it on some back roads and hoon it, you know, have some fun in it, but like a cop who's sitting in his car 5 miles down the road doesn't hear this engine just screaming like this race car engine, you know, like it's kind of more attention than I want to draw to myself, I guess you could say. Where like this M2, I think, looks a lot more subtle, and it's definitely like a lot more quiet. You know, it has a nice exhaust note in that, and you know, it's not the most quiet car ever, but if you compare it to like the sound of like a GT500 or a GT350, especially like if you're talking about like modifying the exhaust or something like that, I feel like they kind of just draw more attention than would be good for your driver's license. So that's kind of my thoughts on the thing, on the situation at this point in my life right now. Now, you know, that might change over time, so yeah, just commenting on that for you guys. So overall, I'm kind of running the numbers in my head a little bit here and thinking about the total cost of ownership of having the 2012 Shelby GT500, and I'd probably ballpark it at about $25,000 to $30,000 to own that car for 4 years. So that includes the depreciation, the tires, insurance costs, which is about $100 per month, gasoline, oil changes,